Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Adam Breneman. Adam, it feels like you've been everywhere over the course of the last few weeks, maybe the last month. You've basically, from my perspective, you just missed football season so much that you pretend that it just never ended.
Yeah, I do miss it, man. I do miss it. No, it's been, listen, for the stuff I'm doing with the interviews and the content, the best time to do it is once the season ends, when the coaches, I wouldn't say they have time on their hands, but they certainly have more time on their hands, and they're more likely to say yes to doing an interview and to doing a sit down. So, yeah, I mean, the last few weeks I did a little North Carolina trip, went to Duke, Wake Forest. I couldn't get North Carolina to let me come interview Bill Belichick, unfortunately, but was at Michigan and had Sherman Moore on the show, had Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. I'm traveling on Thursday to go have Marcus Freeman on at Notre Dame. So that's going to be a really cool interview. You know, when you get the final email that's like says the guest is actually going to do the podcast, it's like a big win, you know? So my team was fired up when we got Marcus Freeman. That's kind of been a wish list one for us for a while. So yes, definitely busy. The travel does not stop once the season ends.
You mentioned the trip to go see Kenny Dillingham. Had you been back to Arizona State since your exit there? And like, if not, how surreal was that?
I had not. I'd not been back. It was definitely a full circle moment for me. You know, it's funny because you kind of like think to yourself going into it, oh, I wonder what it's going to be like when I go back to Arizona State. I haven't been back since the whole coaching staff got fired and we were under investigation. And then you kind of remember that like you're the only one thinking about that. No one else really cares. Right? They're just all just like they're doing their jobs. But it was definitely cool to be back because I think about where I was in my life when I left Arizona State and the adversity and not knowing what I wanted to do and the ups and downs, and then to kind of see where I'm at now and to be invited back there to interview Kenny Dillingham, who just was coach of the year and made the college football playoff. I thought it was a really cool moment just 3 years later it was cool because it kind of gave me that validity on overcoming the adversity and coming out on the other side and ultimately making something good out of an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, you've obviously been able to kind of turn this into your own media empire that you're growing, and then seeing also Arizona State have the success in the last year. Yeah. If you had gone in there and they're still struggling and they're still dealing with the fallout of everything that happened with Herm Edwards and all that, you're kind of going in there thinking, man, it sucks that it doesn't feel that different. Yeah. And instead, the mood probably was just at a different level. What's the lesson to be learned from this Dillingham hiring? Because as much as we can say, guy's only had one good season, he's got plenty of work left to do. He just made the playoff as a 34-year-old in this sport, and it's 2 years removed from all of that stuff going down in Tempe. So, like, what's your perspective on why it was so significant to see him have a season like this, given the history there?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a few things. One is, man, sometimes in the hiring process, the AD at the time was Ray Anderson. He deserves some credit here. And I think hiring Kenny Dillingham was not the easy move at all. There were a lot of other coaches on the market at the time that would have been much easier to hire, that would have been much safer of hires. But making the safe hire doesn't ever become a legendary hire. It isn't one that ever changes careers. And hiring Kenny Dillingham as a first-time head coach who's in his early 30s, who had never led a program before, was a risky move. But at the same time, there were so many reasons then that it made sense. He's an Arizona guy. He had recruited at such a high level. It felt like ASU needed something new, needed something outside the box to come out of the Herm Edwards era. And Kenny wanted that job. It's rare in college football to find someone who isn't just excited about a job because they want to be head coach. But Kenny dreamed and grew up dreaming of becoming the head coach at Arizona State. So making the risky hire, when it pays off really well. And I think with how fast the coaching cycles move nowadays, I think more programs should make risky hires. Because if it doesn't work, you fire your coach in a year or two and you hire a new one. But if it does work with a coach like Kenny Dillingham, it's a home run. And it changes the entire energy around the program. It changes the way that the Valley in Arizona views Arizona State football has changed completely since Kenny Dillingham took over. I give him a lot of credit. I think that's a trend we're going to keep seeing in college football. when in an era where you have to win and you have to win right away, and you need to rally the fan base. You got to recruit at a high level. You have to retain your own roster, and you have to raise money. We're going to keep seeing these like younger and younger, energetic coaches who maybe don't have a ton of experience, because the reality is, Connor, the experience of the last 15 years in college football doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't even help you. It's a completely different game than it was before. It's not about recruiting high school players anymore. It's about so many other things, and hiring people like Kenny Dillingham will become a trend. We're going to see it more and more in college football, I think.
The under 40 coaches, it's as good as it's ever been in college football with Dillingham and Dan Lanning, Sharon Moore, a guy that you just went and visited in Ann Arbor, Spencer Danielson at Boise State, Marcus Freeman, a guy that you're going to be able to go and see. And like, there are just, I think there are a lot of people who could look at that and go, well, NIL just forces coaches to be more relatable. Since the dawn of time, we've been saying that, oh, coaches got to be more relatable. That's why it's getting younger. But it truly feels like we're opening up the profession to a place that it really hasn't been open to in the past. You were once in that spot where you knew what it was like to be young in those meetings and talk to athletic directors who have this certain perspective of what a head coach should be. What's your viewpoint on the coaching world being younger and really acknowledging that it's not necessarily the prerequisite that 20 years of experience like it felt like it used to be?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think the coaching world should skew younger just by the nature of who you're interacting with. I mean, you're dealing with 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, and so much of that is relatability. I think if you can find a good young coach who has some experience, but also like carries themselves well and can build a good coaching staff around them, that's the perfect combination. It's not just a young coach who's a good recruiter. It's a young coach who has a staff to put around him who understands football, who has some experience. Where like Kenny Dillingham, everyone talks about how young he is. Yes, true. But like Kenny was the OC at Florida State, at Oregon. He had been he was at Memphis with Mike Norvell. He had seen it at a really high level. So that combination is really special. I think the pro and the con there. The pro is that you get someone in a young coach who can relate to the players, who can say to the players, 10 years ago, I was in your shoes when I played, right? Or understands what the players are going through. It's a little bit easier for a player to relate to Kenny Dillingham than it is for a player to relate to a coach who's turning 60. The con there is that young coaches sometimes have trouble, or at least the perception is they have trouble managing a program. They have trouble from a discipline standpoint. Some coaches used to always say to us when I was a young coach, used to say, you got to show the players you care, but you can't be their friend. Like there's that fine line of respect. And I think some ADs, some school presidents are afraid that young coaches don't demand the respect that a 50, 60, 40-year-old coach would. I think that the great young coaches are great at balancing that line of, listen, I'm here for you. We're going to relate really well. I'm a players coach. We're going to have fun doing what we do. But ultimately, I'm the authority figure, and you're going to respect me. And that comes from setting the standard. I asked Kenny Dillingham that in my interview with him. I said, Kenny, how do you balance that where, like, you play video games with the players? How do you make sure they respect you as a coach? He's like, because day one, if someone's 10 seconds late to my meeting, like, their ass is off the team or they're running for 7 weeks straight. Like, there's no gray area here. Like, this is my program, and here's the rules. But then the players enforce it themselves, and then Kenny can relate to the players and make sure he's there for them on a personal level.
Yeah, and that stuff internally, we don't necessarily get that full perspective. We see what Kenny Dillingham says going into the playoff about how he offered guys that wanted to transfer a roster spot and said, look, you can stay. I'll make sure you get taken care of, but we need the depth. We need you guys around. And it's, it comes off as very players coach focused for the young coach, but really there's a lot that goes into it. And there's stuff that you can do behind closed doors that's certainly different. Sharon Moore, it's so interesting to look at his career at this stage, because Michigan is essentially doing what Ohio State wanted to do with Ryan Day. And it won't come out and never admit that, but superstar coach leaves, in-house promotion, keep the program afloat. And ideally, best case scenario, when you win a title. That's all you can really hope for when you do something like that. It's not some, Brian Kelly to LSU or Lincoln Riley to USC like splash. Think that happens for Moore at Michigan eventually?
Yeah, I think it does. The thing I noticed about Sharon Moore, I had never really spent that much time around him. Like, I knew him from when I was coaching. He was a tight ends coach at Michigan at the time, so we had talked. We recruited Colston Loveland against each other when I was attendance coach at ASU. We were trying to get him. He ends up going to Michigan. Great get and evaluation by Sharon there. But the thing with Sharon Moore, I think it takes a unique person to step into that job after Jim Harbaugh, and to have the humility and the self-awareness to kind of make that program their own, to be okay with the fact that everyone loved Jim Harbaugh, and Jim Harbaugh did a fantastic job there. But it's not an easy guy to replace. I mean, because everyone talks about how much they love Coach Harbaugh, but at the same time, Sharon has to build that program his own way. He has to put his own fingerprint on there somehow. And I think Sharon's done a really good job of bringing his own energy and his own identity to Michigan football. So when you walk around that building, a lot of it is the same exact way it was when, normally when you have a coaching change, the whole building changes. The pictures look different on the wall. The slogans are different. It's all the same. But Sharon Moore is still his own coach and comfortable in his own skin. So I think that's what's going to allow him to be successful, because the infrastructure is there at Michigan. Like the resources, the support is all there. Can your head coach rally the troops, recruit at a high level, and ultimately retain his own roster? Because everything else is going to take care of itself, in my opinion. So I think Sharon's the right guy. Listen, this season was the ups and downs. I think he made some mistakes in the transfer portal, and maybe not signing a quarterback. The landing Bryce Underwood changes the whole program, the trajectory of it moving forward. I think Sharon's gonna get it done there, and I think we'll see them win a title.
He's got to stop dressing like Harbaugh, though. Dresses too much like Harbaugh.
Too similar, right?
Like I saw it because I saw your interview with him, and I'm like, dang, did he just take that out of Harbaugh's closet? We gotta change the vibes a little bit. I know you want to replicate him, and you're a Harbaugh disciple and everything, but I just looked at that. I was like, he'll find definitely his own look there. But
he tells a hilarious story when I interviewed him about how he got the tight ends job at Michigan, and just the story of, like, he's in the interview room. Sharon at the time was like in the MAC somewhere, I think like Central Michigan or something. And Sharon had him come to Michigan, did an interview. It was like hours long. Thought he was flying home, had a flight home, and Harbaugh's like, "Yeah, like I'll see you same time tomorrow morning. Like we'll do it again." And ran back to interview again. And he just talks about how Harbaugh had Sharon Moore like doing drills in his full suit. He's like drenched in sweat. Sharon Moore is like blocking a chair. And in the interview, Sharon's like, yeah, Coach Harbaugh was like, had a lip in, was like, run that back, show me that again. And just like had him like running through different drills that he would have the tight ends do. And then ended up hiring him after 2 days of interviews.
Worth it. Absolutely worth it. Led to a dream job, it seems like.
Yeah.
Who would you pick as the next first-time national championship winning coach? List is pretty long now. I mean, 3 guys in college football that have won national titles. Who would be your pick? Because I imagine, all these under 40s are, with Lanning and Freeman. Those guys are certainly popular candidates.
Yeah, I mean, my mind goes to 2 guys. One of them you just said. I go to Dan Lanning, and then I go to James Franklin at Penn State.
Of course it does.
Yeah, but I just think like Penn State's so close. I think, listen, I think you could call me a homer for that pick like 3 years ago. I think now, like they are so close. In 2025, with Drew Aller coming back, the fact they retained both running backs, the fact that they're making some moves in the portal at receiver, I think they still got to make some more. Penn State's just been so close the last couple of years. It feels like it's going to happen soon. And then Dan Lanning. I mean, I listen. I think Dan Lanning's got an argument to be a top 2 coach in the game right now, top 3. I mean, he's as good as they come, and the way he's building that program, the way they're recruiting, Oregon football is different, and they have some swagger under Dan Lanning. So I think Oregon gets the job done.
If Lanning is still in year 6 or year 7 at Oregon, and he hasn't been to a semifinal, the comp is going to be Franklin, and that's going to come. The 4-20 mark against AP top 10 teams, I just can't get past it. And I like we've talked about this, so we don't need to go down this road again about like we differ on Franklin. You have a much different perspective than I do, looking at it from the outside. And as a Joe Moorhead appreciator, I have certainly shared my biases on that. But
yeah,
I thought they missed Beau Pribula in that semifinal game. I thought they really could have used him, and it could have ignited the offense in ways that Drew Aller just quite frankly couldn't. And
Yeah.
that was, to me, the most frustrating thing if you're watching that from a Penn State perspective. How badly do you think they needed him that night, and it could have changed up the mojo for their offense?
Yeah, it could have changed a lot. And the biggest thing, I mean, when Beau decided to transfer and wasn't available for that semifinal game, everyone kind of kept saying like, well, it's the backup quarterback. How important can it be? I was on one of the shows I do. I was like, man, like Beau Pribula is a guy who touches the football a few times a game for Penn State. And like, you got to think like a few touches a game is a lot. I mean, sometimes your best receiver gets 5 touches a game. Like that's
zero in a semifinal game.
Exactly. The great point. Well, that's where I was going with this next. Beau Pribula meant a lot to this Penn State offense, and one of the biggest reasons was because of the lack of receiver talent that Penn State had. I think for all the things that James Franklin's done right, and I love Coach Franklin, I think he's done a great job, as you know. I think one of the big misses this past season was not signing an elite wide receiver. They signed Julian Fleming, who ended up not even being a contributor for most of the year. He had a couple big catches, but especially against in the USC game, but for the most part, didn't play much of a role. Lost Keandre Lambert-Smith to the portal for a variety of reasons. But listen, when everyone in the stadium knows you need to throw the football, there has to be someone who can win and get open and win one-on-one. And you watch the film back of that semifinal game, there is never a moment where there's an ounce of separation created by a receiver. There's separation created by route concepts, and that's where Andy Kotelnicki has to keep improving and getting those route concepts better. But never once is there separation from a Penn State receiver. And on that interception, the final Penn State offensive player of the game, when Drew Aller threw the pick, and he's going to get all the criticism as he should. He's the quarterback, and he's got to be better than that. You can't throw that ball. But the mistake there was Penn State trying to score at the end of the game there with a tie ball game. That go to overtime, where you can use your 12 personnel, run the football, play your style of offense with a minute on the clock, and you're backed up on your own 20, and you don't have a single receiver who can win. You're putting your 5-star quarterback in a terrible position where Drew Aller now feels like he has to go make a play. And listen, not having a better receiving core for Drew Aller is a disservice to your 5-star quarterback. There's just no other way to put it. Not having someone who can win one-on-one is inexcusable, and it cost Penn State that game. They should have been playing in the national championship.
Before I get to, because I do have more things I want to get to you with Beau Pribula and what Mizzou fans are getting with him. Keandre Lambert-Smith, you hinted at it. What happened there? Because for him to leave that situation where he could have been the top receiver post-spring to sign up to play with Peyton Thorne and then to play really well with Peyton Thorne, it's one of the more head-scratching things, especially if you know the history of Auburn receivers and how they've really struggled to have those guys excel, pre-draft and all that stuff as well. Make sense of it, because I have not been able to.
Yeah, I do not know, to be totally. I don't know the whole story, to be honest with you. Listen, Penn State's really good at keeping things under wraps that don't get leaked out to the media.
That's true.
I don't know. It doesn't make a ton of sense. As any transfer does nowadays in college football, my guess is that it has something to do with NIL money. That's like seems to be the safest assumption there. It certainly wasn't because it wasn't for the quarterback play or something like that. I mean, it was probably financially motivated. And listen, I think I don't have a great answer for what actually happened with Keandre, but I know this, that Keandre was a talented player. I don't know how he was off the field. I don't know how he fit in with the locker room at Penn State. I wasn't there, but Keandre is very talented, and I think Penn State missed having a wide receiver with that kind of juice.
What is Mizzou getting with Beau Pribula as its QB1 for next year?
Beau is, first of all, he's a great person, unbelievable leader. Like the players at Penn State love Beau Pribula. I know that the sentiment around the locker room, like there's very few people at Penn State that James Franklin and those players would let stay on the team during bowl practices or during playoff practices, knowing they were transferring. Beau was one of them that they would have let stay around knowing he was going to transfer. The issues ended up being logistically, like he was taking visits and couldn't come to practice, so he ended up leaving the team. At the most places, if you enter the portal, you're not coming to practice anymore in the semifinal week. That's how much respect that program has for Beau. I mean, Beau's a Central PA guy, grew up down the street from me. He's tough. He's gritty. He's extremely smart. His brother, Cade, was a great player at Delaware, played quarterback, great family. I think Beau checks every box off the field. He is a unbelievable athlete running the football. He's got some swagger and he's got a great elusiveness to him. But man, he is just as good throwing the football. Everyone talks about how he's kind of a dual threat quarterback and he's good in the zone read game, and I think he is. But I've seen him in person at some of those spring practices in fall camp. He can zip the ball now. Like, he has some serious juice on his arm, and I think that Penn State's done a really good job developing him into more of a bigger pocket guy that can stand in the pocket and deliver the ball down the field. He feels like that perfect fit of, you want the guy who's mobile, who can play in the zone read game, who can make throws off balance, who can make off-platform throws, who can kind of play shortstop at quarterback. But you also got to be able to, in the 2-minute drill, deliver the ball down the field on 3-step and 5-step drops. And Beau can really do it all. I think Beau is a potential NFL player. I think, like, when he first got to Penn State, people were kind of, oh, is he going to play safety? Where is he really going to fit in? Beau has developed into a true quarterback, and Missouri is getting a really good one. Saw that clearly. I mean, the market for Beau was pretty hot now. A lot of teams went after him to be their starting quarterback, and Penn State did a good job developing him.
If the market wasn't hot, he stays on that Penn State team throughout the playoff, and he just says, you know what, I'll just see what it looks like post-spring. Maybe I help myself a little bit there, but when the market is that hot, you got to make a move like that. No doubt. So I'll tie this back to Penn State then. Because I think right now with what he's been asked to do, and that's a different conversation than what he's capable of doing. Yeah. I think he looks like what Will Levis looked like at Penn State. And then before he transferred, goes to the biomechanics expert and becomes the thrower that we know him to be today. Yeah. Is he more of a post Penn State Will Levis, or is Beau Pribula more of a peak Penn State Trace McSorley?
This is a good question. I think he's more of a peak Penn State Trace McSorley. I think the difference is, I think Beau's playing style is much more similar to Trace, and in how now I would say Beau maybe is a little bit of a better, like, true pocket passer than Trace was at Penn State. I mean, Trace was very much off platform, shots down the field, check down or touchdown, was a big play guy at quarterback. I think Beau has the ability to kind of be that tweener who can take the shots on the field, who can escape, but also can stay in the pocket and hit a dig route 15 yards in the middle of the field in stride, in timing, with good timing in the pocket, where that was never really Trace's strength. And I think Beau is just more athletic and better improvising and better off schedule than Will Levis was. So I would go more towards a Trace comparison for Beau.
Last one for you. Yep. I think I'm ready to end all future comps to Brock Bowers and even Tyler Warren. And I would still say that Bowers ended up being the better college player than Tyler Warren. But yep. I'm anticipating the future comps of those two guys, and I'm already kind of sick of it. And I'm just like, what are we really doing here, guys? You have more authority than I do to make the declaration that we just need to stop those comps before they really get going. Could you get behind a motion like that? Just say, you know what, if you're thinking about comparing a tight end to Brock Bowers or Tyler Warren, just find somebody else.
Yeah. Or like NFL wise, can we stop with the George Kittle comparisons for everybody? Yeah. I mean, every tight end is a George Kittle comp. So it's listen, when you're a tight end, it's like an honor to get compared to those guys. When I was playing, it was Gronk. Everyone was Rob Gronkowski. Every college coach who recruited me, oh, you're going to be just like Gronk. You're going to be just like Gronk. I'm like, can we come up with something more original than Gronk?
Look, you know what? There are worse comps to get, and I'll spare the people who are currently self-dubbing those nicknames. But the comps that you probably got, it had to be pretty significant, like even beyond just like the Gronk stuff. Because I imagine Northeast at that time, you're hearing a lot of that. But was there one that you heard and you just thought to yourself, I'm not like that guy at all? And that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Aaron Hernandez. I don't know. Is that podcast appropriate?
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Man. That was actually before Bill O'Brien had just come from the Patriots, and it was and that was like before obviously all that stuff happened with Aaron Hernandez. It was, and he had just had Gronk and Hernandez. So and Bill O'Brien was bringing this 2 tight end system to Penn State. So like the comparison the whole time was like, you're Gronk, you're Hernandez. Like we're the two tight ends at Penn State. And I wore 81 at Penn State, Aaron Hernandez, 81 at the Patriots.
I see it.
And I was playing that like off ball move tight end that Aaron Hernandez was playing. And so I always make that joke that like my comp at Penn State was Aaron Hernandez. And then I would say to Bill O'Brien, like, you still sure about that comp?
Adam, definitely not Aaron Hernandez. Just slightly different. Really,
you did not think I was going that route with the comp.
You know, I really didn't. I wouldn't have made that connection before. I think you know what? Let's include Aaron Hernandez in that comp. No more comps to Aaron Hernandez, Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren. They are officially off the table.
I love it.
Adam, really appreciate it, man. Safe travels with everything you got going on.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.